events that will lay the foundations for maybe a parallel state summit. So the big question is, what does a northern town look like in the parallel state, and what happens in its public spaces? So I'd like to say thank you before we start, as it's co-curated by Elin Lee and Helen Kilby Nelson, who can't be here today, but they are from the parallel state together with Olivia Jones of Doncaster. Some of you will know a citizen-led publication and movement in Doncaster. So our first speaker today is Sarah Smizz. She is an artist, a radiographer, and a newly elected councillor for Doncaster Metropolitan Borough Council. Her practice is motivated by understanding and questioning care and justice in the systems that we work and live in. As an artist, Smizz has shown her work in New York, at the Side Gallery in Sheffield, and at Tate Britain. She's been commissioned by the BBC, NHS England, Channel 4, and Guardian, TED, and a massive list of others. In 2017, Smizz won the National UK Award for Radiotherapist of the Year. She is currently publishing a book with Macmillan Cancer Services this next year. So today, resurfacing, Smizz will reimagine Doncaster in the parallel state as a place that lives by the ocean. Good welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing voice as well. And I have to say, this is kind of part of my bucket list to get to do a parallel state. So thank you. And also, I'll feel like this to if you see me doing this, that slide. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So I am obsessed with the idea of the multiverse. Anyone going through the tunnel under the French Gate Centre will know that I'm pretty sure that takes you into a different parallel universe in Doncaster. It might be only a minute, like a second or two, but I'm pretty sure it takes you into another verse. I believe Doncaster has many of its own multiverses, and we are also haunted by the spectre of each different version of Doncaster's history and future and past. See, throughout our lives, we'll come to find ourselves in a lot of different places, a lot of different rooms, a lot of different corners, a lot of different wares. Those wares will be unexpected, they'll surprise us, they'll scare us, change everything, change nothing, and break our hearts. See, when I was younger, my father made us homeless. It was really complicated, but basically it was us fleeing from domestic violence. My mum, my bro, and I left our home in a banged-up car packed full of suitcases, some boxes. I don't remember the packing, but I do remember the leaving. It was a fracturing of time at that time. I learned a bigger part of what happens across our town in high numbers, a trauma of many of us that is in the spectrum of all the worlds that I live and work in. We'll laugh about this someday, my mum said to me, and we both laughed, like you do. Because even though it's hard to live too many years of an awful domestic violent relationship and a home we'd invested in and had really happy memories in too, and terrible to be soaked by the rain and confusing what would happen next. We were alive and we were together. Some years later, just when I'd started to feel like I was finding my feet as a socially engaged practice artist, using these experiences of Doncaster's multiverses and histories with me while I was working at a summer camp in America, and I found myself sitting in front of a man wearing silvery glittery boots. He was wore silver glittery boots, but this time they told me that I was going to die. It was a doctor who told me that I looked like I had cancer, lymphoma. I hear my will fractured harder this time. Time was broken. The timeline branched me. In one timeline, I went living in Sheffield, New York City, building this proper, somewhat self-absorbed art practice. That was my life, eating tacos, hanging out with friends. But in this new timeline, the one I'm living in today, I spent months in hospitals, beds, at my mum's house, in the donks, going through various tests, treatments, and feeling more pain I'd ever felt before, unsure if I'd ever get to leave or live. I had hundreds of people rally around me, literally to save my life, which I'm still indebted to right now, and I feel so grounded here because of it. I looked at 50-50 odds of surviving the next 5 years. months, nearly 2 years later, weak and hobbled, I was forever changed. I kept coming back to this question in my head: what's a meaningful life? And if I had one, because if I didn't, what's the point in saving my life, right? It's a really dumb question to ask, really. I couldn't get my old life back, but even if I wanted to, it didn't fit anymore. But I was gifted a new one here in Doncaster. I can tell you those were the most painful months of my life, even though I'm still living a legacy of chronic illness. I know I'm in the right timeline, in the right multiverse, one where time suddenly became way more important. I'm aware it changed. Here, it is now aware of friendship and love, not just one of love. Friendship is a tool of social activism. It's the renewal of our imaginations about who we are and who we wish to become. It's about being in discourse and engaging about things and others, to be entwined in alliance. I came out at a time of a list of things I always wanted to do, terrified that I'd be back there with regrets. So I got going. I graduated in radiotherapy, won a bunch of awards, as you just heard, and adopted a border collie dog. I did some inner work, took bigger risks like running to be a counsellor. That's mad. And I travelled a ton of places on my, sorry God, bucket list. One thing that was on that list is surfing. That's where I placed Doncaster in parallel state. It is an oceanside state located somewhere in the multiverse between Japan and Hawaii. Inspired by the Japanese Shinto culture, the parallel state Doncaster believes towards nature, including a recognition of the divine spirit, which is called kami, in trees, mountains, as well as the celebration of each season. The Shinto, or spirits, are believed to inhabit all things. In Japan, it's the phenomena that inspires a sense of wonder and awe to the beholder. And they can live in anything. It can be in the table, it can be in my sneakers, it can be in your water, it can be in you, it can be in an artwork. This means we must have to look after everything, take care of everything. Everything is significant. We don't throw trash on the floor or pollute rivers. I've just messed up my thing there, sorry. And we also do the aloha spirit, which is a coordination of mind, heart, and each person with it brings the person to the self. Each person must think and evoke good feelings and bring the life force with them. The parallel state Doncaster values time over currency, and it's known for its surf. Learning from the native Hawaiian scholars on the history of surfing, assert the native Hawaiians exercise agency and resistance to the colonial encroachment by surfing, because the missionaries hated it. It became a radical and revolutionary act, like making artwork and standing up for communities can be. People come here to catch mavericks and chase giants. We measure ourselves against the surf, not each other, and respect Mother Nature. A culture of significance where everyone matters. But Doncaster, surfing in the parallel state, gives us lessons for the relationship of water and its waves and what it represents in our town. We grow up somewhere between the waves and the words, and our hair turns grey and a decade go by. We spend hours, years, months between big waves, small ones, epic ones, forgettable ones, and everyone eventually reaches the shore. The surfer is never done surfing. Each wave can be completely different from the next. The ocean is a definition of chaos and power, a place where Doncaster sits in all of its universes. Some waves are slow to crash quickly. Other waves are ideal space, clean for an artist's palette to work with. You might get a lousy wave and you manage to pull a few tricks and inspire, impress the judges. Other times you get the perfect wave and you mess it up. Each wave is different, but the wave you get is the wave you get. And that's life. There's always one more to catch. The community is never truly done. In my first timeline growing up in Doncaster, pre-parallel state, I was too young to understand why at times I felt unwelcome in the lineup. I began to doubt myself, and on particularly bad days, I wanted nothing more than to get away from here. But now I understand that having tight-knit communities and friendly with the aloha spirit is where people don't feel scared that things that are different and beginning to become there in the parallel state. To us, Doncaster Surfside Communities is all about craft and care, one that we make a commitment to the grave for. I wonder if surfing's purpose is to teach me to be patient. You have to realize that you're on nature's schedule, and nature's schedule is never perfect or convenient. It doesn't go to some pre-determined plan. Communities and artist gyms are the same. Much like the surfer has to be patient enough to develop their style, the artist and the community has to be patient enough to develop a voice. Everyone as equity partners in surfing and in culture. If you do either of these things long enough, you start to realize waves comes in sets. Unfortunately, the only way you learn to avoid the impact zone is by getting caught in it. It's a lesson in timing, like falling in love. It's just right or it's just not. And you decide to take the journey, you should be ready for the ride of your life. But catch one good wave and you'll be hooked. Surfing like art is thrilling precisely because of its unpredictability. It's about depth and a lifelong practice. In the Parallel State, Doncaster has endless of enthusiasm for trying new things regardless of ability and the protocols that are laid out. It makes us realize that sucking at something where the stakes are low can lead us to a better place. Seeing ourselves repeatedly doing something we suck at, no matter how trivial, might make us a bit more sympathetic about how hard it is to do some things like navigate health issues, listening to our neighbors, challenging hostile cultures. By exposing ourselves to the experience of trying and failing, we might develop more empathy. If we succeed in shifting from snap judgments to patience, maybe we could be a little bit more helpful to one another and a whole lot more understanding. If we accept our failures and persevere nonetheless, we might provide a respite from the imperative to succeed and instead find acceptance in trying. Failing is okay. It makes us more likely to gain a place of compassion and innovation. Here in this timeline, I devoted myself to full-time living as if I was living on borrowed time. It's easy to answer the question, how would you spend your time if you only had a few years left? Or what would a place be if it was in a parallel universe? It's much, much harder when you don't know how much time you've got or you don't know how to create change. At quantum level, we are probability waves instead of particles of solid objects, describing these various positions that could potentially be occupied. Surfing waves of energy gives us new belief that we can create some sort of change. The most fundamental change in this Doncaster multiverse is that I no longer act like our time's infinite. That's our default mindset, and it's a lie. I only have so many hours or days with my parents or my dog left. I can only read so many books. I only get so many more Christmases, surf sessions, birthdays, phone calls with friends, so I better choose what matters to me. Whatever time I have left, I have to own it. It's easy to question how you spend that time if you only have a few years left. It's much, much harder when you don't know, so there's no better time, whatever Doncaster multiverse you're in, to put people, compassion, and care first. Money's circulated, you can always get it back. Time is spent, you can never get that back. Let's invest our time, and it all starts with heart. We can stop the waves, but we can learn how to surf, and that's how to do the difficult work of care. Thank you.